So good morning. Coming in out of the woods from last weekend. Had a great camping trip with my scout troop. It was a good time to be able to get away and to be able to see the scout camp that we're going to out west of just west of Harrisburg, across the Susquehanna River, not too far from York, Pennsylvania, if you're familiar with that area. If you could also, one other thing to keep in prayer, at the Apple store where I work, an opportunity has come up. Usually I'm what's called a technical expert. I do troubleshooting of the devices, and I also do the repairs on the phones. An opportunity has come up. Usually it doesn't. It's a very rare opportunity of two part-time genius positions. Geniuses are the ones that also work on the Macs. And it's something I've applied for twice before in the past, have gotten to the third level, and they went with the other person. The weird thing was the one other person stayed for less than a year, and the other person stayed for 2 months. And I'm still there. So, I put my resume in for that on Friday. I'll find out on Tuesday about stage one interviews, and so just to keep that in prayer. If it's a door that the Lord wants to open up for me for that, it's still staying part time, which is good, but it's another challenge, another opportunity. So what I want to do this week, real quick, the video that we saw last week on have they actually found Noah's Ark, which would be really kind of an amazing thing to be able to find. And we see news stories of archaeological discoveries that support things that are in the Bible, and it's I mean, amazing stuff that they're still finding over there. I don't know whether I will ever see it, be Indiana Jones, but to actually find the Ark of the Covenant, I don't know if that would be a good thing or a bad thing, given what the Ark can do if you do it wrong. But there has been a lot of stuff on the Ark, and I was looking for videos to be able to show, and it was a little bit of a challenge because I had to find something that would fit in the roughly 40-minute time frame, something that was more biblical rather than secular. And so many of these, you really got to watch when you're going through YouTube, just like with anything else, of making sure that your sources are good. A lot of them are videos of things that are a little bit shaky in terms of the individuals that are involved and stuff like that. Sort of researching the ones that I was looking at. And this past week, Denise sent me a news link on Fox News. It's our guy from our video last week. Whoops. How about we actually put that on the actual screen here? Now, here's the question. Can I do that? Oh, boy. I don't know if I can put this. Let me see. I want to move this one. Actually, let's do this. Let's close that one out. And I'll reopen the link from your text message to me. And reopen the app. I'm going to try to drag it over. It's always the challenge of doing this with the other screen. Is that going to work? There it is. There you are. Sort of. Where'd it go? It was starting to. And then, wait a minute. It was, and then it wasn't, yes. We're going to call that the Enoch screen. Let's see if I change that to full screen apps and see if that works. Nope, it doesn't. Crud. wait, there's a way to do this, maybe. Let me, well, you know what? I don't want to. I'll put the link up on our Facebook page. But suffice it to say, the guy that we saw in the video, this is a story that was on Fox News on April 22nd. Researcher believes Noah's Ark found in Turkey after new underground scans. They're continuing to do archaeology on that site that we saw in the video last week. And some of these subsurface scans that they use with the technology, using radar and sonar scans, have found what appear to be tunnels inside that structure. That it seems to be a man-made structure. There are tunnels about 4 meters, about 12 feet below the surface. The tunnels are about 2 meters or about 6 feet tall. They go down into the center of the boat and on the outside edge of the shape that looks like a boat hull, and they do not extend outside. So if they were natural structures, why are they just inside the edges of this thing? Tunnels, possible support beams and walls suggest that it's a man-made object and not in a natural formation. I love the way the article is written. Many geologists disagree, saying the remote site is a mile from the Iranian border, is nothing more than a hill, but we have the biblical account of it. The dimensions match the biblical description. And the big thing from the video last week is that the soil that's inside the edge of that is very, very, very distinctly different from the soil outside of it. It's got a lot more organic matter in it. It also has a lot more iron in it. Nails, possibly. 3 times more organic matter inside it than literally just on the outside edge of it, indicating that there's something there. It's a distinct object. It's not just part of the mountainside. It's not just part of the geology. He believes that it's an ancient man-made structure. What he wants to do next is to tunnel slightly into it and send robotic cameras down inside to be able to see what's inside there, similar to what they've done with the pyramids, with some of the structures that they found. And
How deep do they think it is?
well, the tunnels are about 12 feet down, so it's not that far. He says in the article, though, that they had to proceed with caution because archaeology is a destructive science. It is up to a point, because you're something that's buried and you're digging it up. So he says, once you dig a hole and remove material, you can't put it back. But the whole point of archaeology is that they know how to dig the hole without damaging what's there and going through and sifting through the material that they remove. It's archaeology isn't something new. So, yes.
Did the article say anything about, we were just discussing this week at another Bible study that I go to, and they brought this up. And in the person that was bringing this information to us said
There you go.
there was some sort of, I don't want to say problem, but discussion with the Turkish government that were our excavators allowed to actually go down and do this? Because the government Turkey wanted to do it themselves, which red flags came up.
Of course, sure, yep.
But was anything mentioned in that?
No, there wasn't. And the fact that he's actually there and doing this kind of stuff, the interesting thing is that it is a lot of non-destructive, like sonar and those kind of things, but not actual archaeological digs. That is a little bit concerning. The Turkish government is a secular government, but it is very much a Muslim slash,
We'd never know.
yeah.
We would never know.
Well, it's a Muslim slash Orthodox Christian, Eastern Orthodox, a little closer to the Catholic Church maybe than I would like. You'd think the Vatican archives and what are things are in the Vatican archives and stuff like that. So that is a concern. It is also very close to the Iranian border. And of course, that's not a really good place to be in this time right now. So So where we're going next is we're going into part two. We looked at part one. We really did an in-depth dig into Genesis 6 through 9 in looking at the events of the flood. And you see there, we're looking at 3 chapters that are being very, very, very specific in terms of dates and time and stuff like that that are describing the flood. And people say, well, but wait a minute, what about the birth of Jesus? We don't know precisely when the birth of Jesus was. What year, what month, we don't know. We know for sure it wasn't December. It was not December. It was more likely in the springtime, just because of travel. You're not going to be traveling in the wintertime, those type of things. But we don't know. Yes, we've got extensive scriptural descriptions of the birth of Jesus, but they're not detailed the way that the flood description is in terms of the number of days that it took and what month and what day and all that kind of stuff. This description is very unique throughout the rest of the Bible. And again, the flood was recorded in Genesis 6 through 9. Jesus refers to Noah and the flood, all right, in 2 different places, in Matthew 24, 37 to 39, and then in Luke 17. So if I'm going to go to Luke 17 first, only because that's what opened up first. Luke 17, 26 and 27. And the page won't turn. There we go. And he's speaking about when the question from the Pharisees of when is his kingdom going to come. And part of his response in Luke 17, 26, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Jesus talked about Noah and the flood. It's definitely a real event. Matthew 24, 37 to 39 is recording the exact same conversation. It's also in 2 Peter, in 2 Peter 3. It's a lot easier to do this when I've got 2 hands. I was just there. No. I'll just lay it down. There we go. In 2 Peter 3, verse 6, Peter refers to it as well, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes condemned, 2 Peter 3, Sodom and Gomorrah versus Noah, whereby the world that was being overflowed with water perished. Peter talked about the flood. Jesus talked about the flood. It's a historical event. I don't care what the secular people say, it was a historical event. We know that was. But the secular world continues to question, is the flood really an event that actually happened? Because sad to say, and the argument that they use is they refer to our blind faith, that we have blind faith in the Bible, all right? Oh, what was it that famous politician said? Something about us holding onto our Bibles and guns? That it's our blind faith in the Bible, and that we're falling back on God said so. Well, how do we know the flood was real? Because God said so. Well, is there evidence that the flood actually happened? So we're sort of, we want to address the problem that the skeptics, the secular people will say, if the flood was a myth, and we believe it is, if the flood was a myth, then what about the whole rest of the Bible? Isn't that also a myth? If you can't trust one piece of it, how can we trust all the other parts of it? So that's a big piece of why we're going through and why we're addressing this particular topic. And the skeptics come up with 6 particular questions that we're going to address over the next however many weeks it takes me to get there. We're going to address these particular 6 questions that our skeptics come up with. How could the flood have been global? Is that possible? How can you have a flood that covers the entire planet? How could the waters cover Mount Everest? Mount Everest is 27,000 feet tall. All right, how could the waters cover Mount Everest? How can you have 40 days of constant rain? And it's not just constant rain, it's torrential rain. It's rain that you cannot see from here to the wall away from you when it's raining. Constant torrential rain. We've never seen that before. Or have we? Interesting, when I was in college, my meteorology professor, Professor Thor, was in the Air Force in the 40s, and he was assigned to a little village in India called Cherrapunji. I always remember that name, Cherrapunji, India. It was real close to the foothills of the Himalayas. And he found it interesting when he arrived in Cherrapunji that all of the entire village was on 30-foot stilts. And he didn't understand why it was on 30-foot stilts. He found out. Cherrapunji is in the area of the world where they have the monsoon rains. And he said it was really easy to make a weather forecast in Cherrapunji because you only had to have 2 days. What days do the rains start and what days the rains stop? And those days are roughly 6 months apart. Meteorologically, Cherrapunji, India, in 6 months gets on average between 27 and 29 feet of rain.
I don't like 2 days of rain.
Yeah, exactly. 6 months, 27 to 29 feet of rain. Okay, so you can have that. Meteorologically, you can have that. However, that's localized. That's the monsoon. This was over the entire planet. Where'd the water come from? We know in the Bible it says that it didn't rain, that we had this mist coming up from the ground. Where did all this water come from? Then where'd it go? If you're covering the entire planet about 20 feet deep, where'd it go? It went somewhere. That's actually, number 5 is one of the easiest ones. And number 6, couldn't the flood have just been a local event, not global? So what we're going to be doing as we go through here is we're going to address all 6 of those questions. The other thing we sort of need to address are the geological observations that we have about the Earth. Very similar to what we did when we go back to our science in the Bible. There are legitimate geological observations about how our planet looks and works. And we need to make sure that those things fit into our explanation of where they came from. Very similar to the debate that was going on say 1500, where it was what's in the center of the solar system. Is the Earth in the center or is the sun in the center? All right, you have the Earth-centered system where everything goes around the Earth. And there was a lot of scientific evidence. There were a lot of observations that supported the Earth-centered system. We know now it's wrong, but back then there were a lot of observations that supported it. There were also observations and theories that supported the sun-centered system. But there was stuff that supported them both. It literally took Isaac Newton's laws of motion to be able to describe not just why the Earth-centered system was wrong, not just why the sun-centered system was right, but also why the Earth-centered system was wrong. That's what was so powerful about Newton's 3 laws of motion and his law of universal gravitation. Well, we basically need to do the same thing here. Secular science and geology has what is called the plate tectonics theory. All right, and plate tectonics, as opposed to Big Bang, plate tectonics is also very well established, just like the Big Bang theory is. It does actually have very good observational support. There's a lot of geological evidence to support this thing that we call the plate tectonics theory. But just like the Big Bang Theory, it does have a lot of holes in it. It's got a lot of issues with it, Hawaii being one of them. And we need to address this. How do we explain the problems that the plate tectonics theory has? Whoops, I hit a wrong button. Don't you love when that happens? There we go. That's better. Creation science, what we have, is something called the hydroplate theory. And what's interesting about the hydroplate theory is it very similar to Newton. It doesn't just address the observations about the world that we have. All right, why are the oceans the way they are? Why do we have mid-ocean ridges? Why do we have these really deep trenches, mountain ranges, all of that stuff? Canyons, the Grand Canyon, things like that. It doesn't just address the observations, but it also addresses the holes. It addresses the things that the plate tectonics theory doesn't address. And that's what's so powerful about the hydroplate theory. And we're going to be addressing those questions, those 6 questions. That's our topics for the next number of weeks. We're going back to the science of the Bible a little bit. We get to sort of go back to, we're going to go back to a little bit of basic earth science here, 9th grade earth science. And let's touch on them in a little bit of random order. I'm going to knock out 3 of them this week. And then we're going to knock out the other 3 over the next extended period of time. So let's deal with the easiest one. And what's funny is not just the easiest, but one of the ones that has the most support, and that's question number 6. Couldn't the flood just have been a local event? It just happened in one little place? Well, let's go back to Genesis and let's address that question. So if we go back to Genesis 6, because ultimately we can have our hydroplate theory and we can have all this stuff, but if it doesn't line up with the Bible, it's garbage. So let's go back to Genesis 6 and look at verses 5 through 8. And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord, some versions say grieved the Lord, that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man who I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So let's talk about this local flood thought. And let's look at it in the context of those verses, Genesis 6, 5 through 8. If it was just a local flood, we've got to address a number of different questions from Genesis 6, 5 through 8. If it was only local, were the people that were outside that local flood area righteous? Go back to the verse. God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. Men were scum. We were evil scum. Just in the local area where the local flood happened, and people outside that local area, they were okay. They were pretty good people. No, that's not what it says. It says the wickedness of man was great in the earth. All right, and he repented, it repented the Lord that he made man on the earth, not on the Euphrates Valley or in a particular area, on the earth. All of man, every single one of us, with the exception of Noah and his family. So why didn't God just tell Noah to move? If it was local, if it was just the people in this one local area, San Francisco, New York City, and places are getting really pretty bad, why didn't God just say, move, like he did with Lot? Because where did Lot live? Sodom and Gomorrah. And God came down to Lot and said, oh, guess what? I'm going to clobber these two cities. You better leave. I mean, simplifying the story a little bit. But Lot left. God led Lot to leave Sodom and Gomorrah before he destroyed it. So if it was local, and if Noah was a righteous man, and if the evil was just in a local area, God could have said to Noah, okay, here's what I want you to do. Pick up your family, and you're going to leave, and you're going to go 50 miles away while I clobber this area. Because these are the people that are evil, but the rest of the area is okay. No, that's not what it says. That's not what it says. That he was going to destroy man who I have created from the face of the earth. Not from the Euphrates Valley. Not from a particular place. Was God grieved he made man and animals only in that local area? Again, it sort of goes back to that first piece of that. All right? So that, yeah, man and animals, just the people that are just in that particular little area. I don't like Iran. All the people that live in Iran, they're evil. So I'm going to wipe out Iran. No, again, that's not what it says. I will destroy man who I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast. Everybody.
God didn't do that with Sodom and Gomorrah.
No, he just wiped out Sodom and Gomorrah. Just those cities, not the areas just outside. How does a local flood wipe out all birds? Both man and beast and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air. If you have a local flood, cool. What do the birds do? Fly somewhere else. If you cover the entire planet with water, they can't fly somewhere else. Eventually, they're going to be tired. They're going to have to land somewhere. How does a local flood wipe out all birds? It doesn't make sense. It absolutely doesn't make sense. And if we look at that flood timeline from back in part 1, think about, have we had local floods? 100%. Not even a doubt. We went on vacation down to South Carolina last year, and it was a few months after all that flooding that was down there in North Carolina. And you could still see areas that were damaged and trees and damaged areas down there. But that was a local flood. We were fine up here. It rained, but what local flood has ever produced 40 days and nights of torrential rain? Again, that torrential rain. Okay, yeah, monsoon. True. Covered distant mountains. The mountains all the way in the distance, they were covered. The entire planet was covered. Everything. We get out on the training ship. When I was at Maritime College, you go out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and you're looking all around you, and you just see water. And it was really cool when we got close to the Azores, and we start seeing the top of the volcanic mountain that is part of the Azores, called Ilha de Pico. Pico is Portuguese for mountain. And it's just this little mountain peak, and you start seeing that thing coming up. We were like, yay, look, there's still land. That's great. But that wasn't the case. Everything was covered. No local flood has ever done that. Caused water to continue to rise for 150 days. Remember, it didn't just rain for 40 days and 40 nights. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, the torrential rain. Then the rain sort of eased up. It kept raining. It wasn't this crazy heavy rain, but the waters continued to rise for 150 days and then stayed there for 314 days. Remember, the flood was literally over a year. Those floodwaters were covering every single thing on the planet for 314 days. What local flood has ever done that? And then left the land unstable or unsafe. There was something about what was going on in the earth that, remember, Noah looked out the window on New Year's Day and saw the land was dry. But he didn't get out of the ark until the end of February. almost 2 months later, 57 more days before God finally said, yeah, everything's cool now, you can leave. It wasn't just that it was dried up, the earth was unstable. God had destroyed the geology of the planet and had totally redone the geology of the planet. But local floods don't do that. Sure, they cause damage, but once the floodwaters recede, you come out of your house and you go back and you see what's left in a local flood. That's not how it's described in the Bible. An interesting historical fact. Let's be secular, if you want to do that. Well over 200, and some researchers say it may be as many as 500 different cultures have flood myths as part of their historical record, whatever you want to call it. The Egyptians, the Mayas, the Incans, the Romans, the Greeks. All right? Oh yeah, it's a myth. It's the gods, it's Zeus and all those guys. But that story is still there. Well over 200 different cultures. And those different cultures are literally all across the world. It's not all just European. Oh, it's a whole bunch of cultures just in Europe. That could be describing a local flood. No. These are cultures in Europe, in North America, in South America, in the Polynesian area, out by Australia, in Africa, in Asia, all over the world. There are cultures all over the world that all have the exact same kind of story. And they're all literally the same kind of story. Think about if you had to distill the Noah story, the story of the flood, if you had to distill it down to one sentence. Man was evil and God destroyed everybody. Why? Because man was evil. Yeah? Simple, like distill it down. That's literally what all these stories are saying. They are a similar theme that a deity or deities sends a global cataclysm, a flood, as divine retribution for man's evil. That's what the flood story is. At its absolute heart, that is what the flood story is. And that's what all of these flood myths, quotes, are. How do you have that same kind of story literally all over the planet? And they're not descriptions of, again, they're not descriptions of local floods. They all describe global catastrophes that their deity or deities of their choice decided to destroy the entire planet, just like our flood story in Genesis does. It's just one of those things that makes you go, It's interesting. It's an interesting fact that's there. Okay. Question 5. Where did the water go? Easy. Where did the water go? The Earth's surface is currently 70% covered by water. Okay. There is 10 times more water than land above sea level. If you take the volume of all of the geological features that are above sea level, there's 10 times more water than that. The average depth of the ocean is 12,000 feet across the planet. The average depth. There is enough water in the Earth's oceans to cover the entire Earth to a depth of 9,000 feet. If you made the Earth perfectly flat, all right, it's the billiard ball Earth, and you took the water that is currently on the Earth, it would cover the entire planet to a depth of 9,000 feet. Duh, where'd it go? It's in the oceans, all right? The Earth was different before the flood than after. We didn't have these 12,000 foot deep oceans. They were much shallower seas. They were not really deep oceans. There also wasn't anywhere near as much water on the surface of the Earth. It was somewhere. We're getting there. How could the waters cover Mount Everest? 9,000 feet. If the Earth is flat, the waters can cover the planet to 9,000 feet. Everest is 27,000. Can't cover Everest. Sure, you You're right, you can't. But just like question number 5, there's an incorrect assumption. That assumption it was sort of hidden in our previous question, but it's there. And that assumption is that the Earth's geology and topography, what the surface of the Earth looks like, was the same before the flood as after. That before the flood, the Earth looked just like this, and now after the flood, it looks like this too. Nope, wrong. And that is very, very typical of what is called a uniformitarian mindset versus a catastrophism mindset. In geology, there are 2 mindsets, okay? Uniformitarians and catastrophism. Uniformitarians, they go by long, slow, gradual processes. Plate tectonics is a long, slow, gradual process. Catastrophism, sudden events that make things happen. And what's so funny is the vast majority of geologists, the overwhelming majority of geologists, are uniformitarians. And yet, they have zero problem with what happened at Mount St. Helens or Mount Vesuvius when it erupted and buried Pompeii and Herculaneum in 79 AD. They have no problem with those kind of things. And yet, long, slow, gradual processes. If you ever look at a picture of what Mount St. Helens looked like before and after, it looks really different. And that all happened in under a day. That's a catastrophic event. That's something that happened, that's catastrophism. All right? Have you ever heard of the Greek island called Santorini? It's supposedly a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous island in the Mediterranean off the coast of Greece. And it's got these really high cliffs, and it's the island itself is sort of like a big C shape with this big bay and these high cliff walls. Well, Santorini was a volcano, and the volcanic eruption literally blew off the top of the mountain, totally blew out the side of it, let the ocean into it, and I mean, catastrophic event. And yet most geologists are this uniformitarian mindset. The flood destroyed the earth. That's what it says, all right? That it destroyed the earth. Not just that he was going to destroy all the living things, but that he was going to destroy the earth, destroy the way the earth looked before the flood. Fundamentally, the geological, topographical, and meteorological changes caused by the flood. The world was totally different before and after. Completely different, totally different. Mount Everest wasn't there. If Mount Everest wasn't there, and the Rocky Mountains weren't there, and the Alps weren't there, they weren't, the topography that we see described in the Bible up to Genesis 6 is more hills and shallow seas, not the mountains and deep oceans that we have today. So we're going to spend the vast majority of the time that we're looking at. We've looked at 3 of the questions, okay? Could it have been a local flood? How could it have covered Mount Everest? And where did the water go? What we're going to be addressing are the other 3. How could it have been global? All right? It's a different question. Could it have been local? No, it couldn't. All right, well, if it couldn't have been local, if it really was, how? How could that have happened? How could we have a global flood? How can you have 40 days of constant torrential rain? And where'd the water come from? That's the stuff that we're going to be spending the vast majority of the next probably a good 5, 6, 7 weeks looking at that aspect. And the hydroplate theory addresses these questions. The hydroplate theory is relatively new, 20 years maybe, 25 years. Plate tectonics, to be honest, is not all that old. The plate tectonics theory is only about 100 years old. We're going to fight science with science. We're going to fight science with science. We already have the biblical account. What we need to do is tie what we see, the observations that we see about how the earth is and how the earth works and tie it back to what we know happened in the flood, because we've got that, the very first thing we're going to do next week is we're going to briefly review plate tectonics. We're going to go back to ninth grade earth science. And we sort of have to do that and look at the evidence that supports the plate tectonics theory, because you can't argue against somebody's argument if you don't understand what they're arguing, okay? That's why many times we as Christians trying to argue or convince a non-believer about the validity of Scripture, you can't, because to them it's foolishness. They don't understand it. They have to understand it. They have to be able to know what it is in order to be able to argue. And they don't. They choose not to. So we're going to look at the evidence that supports the plate tectonic theory, and we're going to use that background information about plate tectonics to be able to compare and contrast. And we're going to look at how the hydroplate theory also explains the exact same observations. Where's the biggest, reword that, where's the longest mountain range in the world? What do you think? Where's the longest mountain range in the world? Where? Nope, it's not in Europe. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It's on the bottom of the ocean. It extends from Iceland down through the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, all the way down to the southern tip of South America, and then it splits, and part of it goes underneath South America and goes up into the Pacific Basin, and the other part splits and goes up into the Indian Ocean Basin. Think Mid-Atlantic Ridge, think the seams on a baseball. That's literally what it is. It's the longest mountain range in the world. Plate tectonics has their explanation for where it came from. Hydroplate theory has its explanation of where it came from. We're going to look at it, though, from that flood or catastrophism cause as opposed to the secular uniformitarian cause. But again, in order to sort of understand why the hydroplate theory is so good, we have to understand plate tectonics first. So next week, dig up those old ninth grade earth science books, and we're going to take a look at plate tectonics. Just a real brief look at plate tectonics, and then we're going to go from there into the hydroplate theory. All right. Now, I am going to put up on our Facebook page the one scientist that is like the really big proponent of the hydroplate theory has a text. It's a textbook. It literally is a textbook. It's called In the Beginning. And it does look at some other aspects, but the overwhelming majority of it is dealing with the science behind the flood. All right. It's the plate tectonics textbook for hydroplate theory, as opposed to your typical geology textbook. And that guy has put that textbook online as a PDF file. You can buy the book. And I bought it when we went to a workshop a number of years ago, and it makes my eyes glaze over sometimes. It's really deep. And if you want it, cool. They've got a link. You can download it as a PDF file free online. That if you want to have that as a resource to be able to take a look. But that's going to be my main resource for what we're going to be looking at, and we're going to sort of distill it down. Don't worry, we're not going to go that deep. We're going to go into it at a level that we can understand and be able to see, all right, yeah, here's what plate tectonics says, but here's what the hydroplate theory says and why the hydroplate theory supports what we see about the flood. Very similar to the things that we did in our science in the Bible. All right, the Bible, again, the Bible's not a science textbook. All right, Genesis 6 through 9 is not a geology textbook. But it is a very detailed historical description of a global catastrophism that happened. And what we're going to look at is what evidence is there globally to support what Genesis 6 through 9 says. Is there evidence out there? Is there geological evidence to support the fact that the flood actually happened? The very short answer to that is yes, there is. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at. All right? It's not Answers in Genesis. It's directly from his publisher. I'll get that information and I'll put it on our Facebook page. All right, I'll do that this afternoon. The link to this guy's page, as well as a link to the actual file that you can download that file. There's one other question there, so.
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that I was watching a documentary, I think it's called Genesis History. And they were doing research to prove that at one point the Grand Canyon was completely underwater.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because they said like how the rock formation is, it kind of like slams on each other.
And it's more of like a drainage thing. It looks more like a drainage thing, not this river cutting down through. That is a little silly. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you very much for everybody coming out. Let's close in a word of prayer. Lord, we do so thank you so much for the day you've given to us. Thank you for the information that you've given to me, for the desire to be able to share it, for my ability to be able to bring it forth clearly and in a way that all can understand it, Lord. I thank you so much for this group, for their dedication coming out each week. I pray that you'll be with us, be with our service upcoming, be with Pastor, hide him behind the cross, have the message, the gospel message, come out strong and clear from his lips to our ears, to our actions throughout the week, Lord. All these things we ask in your son's name. Amen.